Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to learn how to compare the intensity of use between different habitat types of different species. So I've downloaded this data from the eMammal website. You might also get it from your eMammal project coordinator. Each row represents a sequence taken by a camera. The first column is the deployment name, and then we've got the dates that the deployment was in and out, the latitude and longitude, location of that deployment, and then for each sequence we have a begin and an end date time, and the common name and scientific name of the species detected in that sequence, and the group size. We also have this column here, column L, which is called sub-project design and represents different habitat types for this particular project, which are suburban, exurban, rural, and wild. And then we have a number of other columns in the data set here which aren't relevant to this particular analysis, but you will see them when you get your data. So for this analysis, we're going to start with, actually we're going to do a number of pivot tables. And so we'll start by selecting the entire raw data set by coming to the upper left-hand corner and clicking. And then we're going to build a pivot table by coming to Data, and clicking Pivot Table. If you're on a PC, the Pivot Table is under the Insert menu. We've already selected our data set, so we can click OK. It's going to take it a second, and it's going to build a pivot table, a blank pivot table here, and then we've got our pivot table builder over here. So in order to do this analysis, we need to know a couple things. We first need to know how many times we detected each species in each habitat type. And then we need to correct those raw counts for the effort that we spent in each sampling in each habitat type, so the number of camera trap nights. So this will take several different pivot tables to do. We'll do the first one, the simplest one, which is the raw count in each habitat type for each species. So we'll take our habitat type, which is called sub-project design, and put it on our rows. There we have our habitats. We're going to take our species name, the common names, and put them on our columns. And then we're going to take the counts as our values, and we want the sum of the counts, which takes into account group size. So it defaults to count of count. To get the sum, we click the I, scroll up to sum, and click OK. And those numbers have changed a little bit. All right, so this is our first pivot table. We can copy rows 4 to 8 by using Control-C or Command-C. Open up a new sheet, right-click to paste special, and paste special values. So this gets it away from the pivot table and into just raw numbers that we can work with very easily. I like to delete the blank and grand total columns. I also like to expand the titles here. And then finally, I like to fill in all my blanks with zeros by selecting where all the numbers are, going to Edit, Replace, find what blanks, replace with what zeros, and replace all. All right, so this is our first pivot table, raw counts. Now we need to know which deployments ran in each habitat and how long each of those deployments ran for, and then we can sum the total number of camera trap nights for each of those, for all those deployments in each of those habitat types. So we're going to go back to our pivot table. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to name this sheet. Counts it can get a little confusing when you're dealing with multiple sheets. I'm going to go back to my pivot table here, and I'm going to change it entirely. We'll just take everything away, start fresh again. So the first thing in this next pivot table is we want to know which habitats each deployment was in. So we'll take title, which is our deployment name, make that the row labels. We've got quite a few deployments. And we'll scroll down to, oops, we'll give it a second. Here we go. To sub-project design, our habitats, and we're going to make that a row label as well. This is unfortunately really the best way to get, that I know of, to get the habitat types or any sort of text value for anything. Okay, so we're going to copy we're going to select this entire column. We're going to copy it. We're going to open up a new sheet. We're again going to paste special so that we get out of the pivot table. I'm going to delete the top 3 cells. There we go. Okay. And so now I've got this column which is each deployment name and below it the habitat that it's associated with. But I want 2 columns, one that's the deployment name and the second that is the habitat associated with it. So to get that, I'm going to copy this entire column, come over to column B, I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to delete the first cell. So I've just moved that second column up. So now you can see Briar Creek 2 is associated with X-Urban. So we've got Briar Creek 2 and X-Urban over here. So we can rename this column Habitat. Now we're going to go all the way to the bottom and we're going to delete a couple of the bottom rows, which I'll show you. So to get to the bottom very quickly, you can go to the bottom edge of this cell, double click, and it takes you to the bottom. And we're going to delete all the blank and grand total columns so they don't get mixed in. There we go. Now we'll go back up to the top. So now we're going to select A and B and we're going to sort by column A. And we want to conserve all the deployment names and delete anything that is not a deployment name. So we selected A and B. We're going to come up to this sort icon. We're going to go to the arrow next to it and choose a custom sort. We're going to sort by column A, but my list does have headers, which is, it has column names, and we're going to hit OK. So now it's going to alphabetically sort by all the deployment names here, and our job is to go through, as I said, and pick anything that is not a deployment name. So here we've got X-Urban. We're going to delete all these things in column A that are X-Urban, and I'm just right-clicking. I'm selecting everything. By holding down Shift key, I'm right-clicking and I'm hitting delete. So we're going to delete all the rural. And all the suburban. Gone too far. I think we have some wild at the end here that we will also delete. All right. So that's it. Now we have 2 columns, one for deployment name and one for habitat. Okay. Call this deployment. All right. So we're getting there. The next thing that we need is to know how long, how many days each deployment ran for. So we're going to go back. First, I'll call this habitat. We're going to go back to the pivot table, and we're going to remake it a 3rd time. This time we'll keep title in the first column, and then we want the begin date time and the end date time. So I'm going to drag begin date time to values. And I don't want the count of begin date time, I want the minimum. Okay, so I click the I, go to minimum, and OK. So this is what is the first day that that camera took a picture. And then I want the end date time, and I want the maximum. What is the last day that the camera took a picture? And this tells me the duration that that camera ran. These date times look weird. Don't worry, we're going to fix them in a second. First, we're going to copy this entire table, go to a new sheet, right-click, paste special, values, delete the top 3 rows. I'm going to expand everything so I can see it clearly. And then if we select columns B and C, right-click, go to Format Cells, Date, scroll down until you see a date time, like that. Okay. And you can see that it switches to the correct format. So everything is correct there. Now we're going to add a new column here. Actually, first, before we do that, let's jump down to the bottom and delete the blank and the grand total so we don't get confused later. Shoot back up to the top. I'm going to add this new column called duration, and the duration is simply equals the max of end date time minus the minimum of begin date time for a given deployment. And there we go. That deployment ran for 14.3989468 days. Now we want to copy this formula down, so we go to the bottom right corner until we see the black cross and double click. And then it copies it all the way down that column. Now, as usual, I want to work outside. I want to work with values. I don't want to work in formulas, so I'm going to select column D, copy it, go to the first cell, paste special, values. Okay, so now I have a column of duration. Now I'm going to combine this together with my habitat column by copying it, going to my habitat sheet, and pasting it. I'm going to jump down to the bottom, make sure it's the same length. It is. That's a good sign. Oops. And now I'm going to make a new pivot table on this product of another pivot table, because I want to know how many total camera nights we have in each habitat. So I've selected everything, and I'm going to go to Data, Pivot Table. Okay. And then I want Habitat to be my rows, and I want Duration to be my values, and I want that to be a sum of the duration. So here we have my little mini table for each habitat type that tells me how long cameras ran in them, total. So I'm just going to copy the camera numbers here. Actually, I'm going to copy the whole table. Give it a second to catch up with me. Bring it to a new sheet, paste special as usual. And then we're going to copy column B. Let's insert another row and put a heading in there. Then we're going to copy column B. We're going to go back to our counts, and we're going to insert the copied cells. All right, so now we've got our counts for each species, and we've got the total number, our total effort, so the number of days that we sampled. And now we need to divide each of these counts by the duration for that habitat to get the intensity of use corrected for effort. So we're going to copy this table, and we're going to paste it twice, one below the other. Oops. And in the third table, we're going to make that a table entirely of duration. So we're going to copy that, hold down Shift, and use the arrow keys to go across everything, and paste. Okay? And then in the very first table at the top, whoops, we're going to use a formula to divide each of the counts by the duration. So we're going to say equals, so this American beaver in X-urban equals the corresponding cell in the table below, divided by the corresponding cell in the table below that, the duration table, and then hit enter. And then we're going to copy that formula and paste it over the rest of the table. And there we go. These represent intensity of use corrected for effort, so equivalent to animal activity within each habitat type. So I'm going to copy this entire table and paste it special over itself so that I'm dealing with values and not formulas. And then I can delete these other tables below. And now I can start looking at some of this graphically. So we can pick a couple species, for example, gray fox and raccoon maybe. Highlight those. We're going to go to charts. I can use a column. Make this a little bigger. And then you can see that the x-axis isn't showing up properly, so we can right-click, go to Select Data, and where it says Category X Labels, we can click this box which then allows us to select the appropriate x-axis categories. Just click and drag, click this box again, and OK. So now we've filled in the habitat, and we have the different colors that represent the different species, and we can see how they might differ a little bit. And in fact, these two species are relatively similar, so raccoons seem to use exurban and suburban habitats more often than rural and wild, not surprising. And the same is true for gray fox, although the difference is pretty stark. There seem to be fairly little activity of gray fox in wild habitats. And so you can go ahead and do this for any number of species and any different types of habitats.